Alright, so quickly we're just going to go over this CCA run. One of the biggest things we're looking for is the spawn of the Tholian ships. The closer they are to the crystal, the better it is, because your gravity well will pull them all in, and your abilities will hit the multiple targets. So as soon as we come in, we go to full impulse, click all our buffs. As you'll see, as I head in, I'm going to start hitting Tactical Fleet, Alpha, Go Down Fighting, Romulan Tier 5 Cloak, and now it's on to the abilities, you'll see. And we're pretty much just hitting everything at this point. We'll go over all the things that are on this build, all the different abilities, and we'll go over what they've done for DPS. But now it's just pretty much a race. You could see the Tholian ships getting sucked in there. That's the Gravity Well. It's really nice to mix Gravity Well 3 and Subspace Vortex 3 together. And there, the run is over. Combat log ended. Alright, so this is the actual build for the ship we just used in CCA. We're using the multi-mission science vessel from the 31st Century pack. Up front, we're running the neutronic torpedo, the enhanced biomolecular, and the gravimetric. For deflector, we're going Solene for the EPG. We have a secondary, just a regular deteriorating. Impulse and warp, we've decided to go with the temporal for the two-piece, which is going to give us plus 25% to all damage over time abilities. And for shields, we just have the Iconian. Our aft weapons are mostly, we're using them for the three-piece setup. We're using the Chronometric Polaron Omni, the regular Polaron Beam, and the Chronum Chronoton Torpedo for the Chronometric Energy Converter. As you can see here, when I activate it, getting plus exotic and plus energy weapon damage for 15 seconds. In engineering, we're using the Constriction Anchor that is purchasable. Oh, fuck, hold on, I messed up. Whatever, just pick it up from right there because I could edit it. So, for engineering, first we have the Casual Anchor, which is the console from the ship, giving us more exotic damage. We have the Constriction Anchor. We have the Pulse Emitter console, which I'm testing out. For science, we have a Field Exciter with EPG. We're using 3 of the exotic particle focusers. And then we have a console that's actually very important to this build and very cheap, the Isometric Charge. The electrical damage this console does stacks with your EPG, so the better the EPG, the better these numbers are. You can see the 4th target is getting a lot of AoE electrical damage, and you'll see it in the parse. It does around 70k DPS for me in that run. In tactical, the dynamic power redistributor. This is from the Federation version of the prototype Dreadnought. We have the auxiliary ejection from the Kelvin Connie, and then the Delphic Tier, another console that actually does some pretty good DPS in there for us. And hangar, we got the basic Epoch fighters. So we look at our skills. It's a basic science ultimate, nothing special. We're using Temple Operative primary and Strategist secondary. For traits, some of the basics you'll see: Inspirational Leader, Good Day to Die, Particle Manipulator, Fleet Coordinator, Innocuous, Operative, Projectile Training, Psychological Warfare to give us some more bonus to our control. Really nice for our gravity well, because as you saw in there, when the ship spawns are the right way, when you get all the recluses and the Tholian ships right in front, a nice strong gravity well brings them right on top of the crystal, and that really does help your damage. And then we're using Anchored. For starship traits, we have Highly Specialized. We have Numerical Superiority. This is off the T6 Hestia, and this trait is really nice in CCA. Obviously, there's 10 people in there, and most people are targeting the actual crystal, so it's giving us 2 self plus 10 to 50% all damage based on number of allies targeting your target. And the fact that it's all damage means it's boosting our exotic stuff and all that, so this is very nice in there. Running Checkmate, obviously we're using projectiles and exotic as our damage base, exotic modulation, and time to kill. So we have, obviously we have Temple Operative primary, so we have continuity, so we did not need Invincible. Most of these runs are usually within the 20 to 30-second range. Space rep, you got your basics, Omega Kinetic Cutting Shearing. We're using Astrometrics Torpedo Astrometric Synergy. Works really nice to reduce the cooldown of our science abilities because we're using torpedoes. Auxiliary to offense, and then we have our crit chance and crit severity. And now you'll see our stations. This is some of the important stuff we're using for tactical torpedo spread 2 and high yield for our torps up front. In the Lieutenant Commander Universal, you'll see we have Tachyon Beam and Charge Particle Burst, both to trigger our secondary deflector. Then we have a Subspace Vortex 3. In our Lieutenant Commander Engineering, we're using Emergency Power to Auxiliary. We're using Reverse Shield Polarity just for a little bit of heal if we need. And then Structural Integrity Collapse 3. In the Ensign Science, just your hazard emitters. In our Commander Science, we have, it's a temp op seating, so we have Channel Deconstruction, Destabilizing Resonance Beam, another ability that triggers our secondary, Recursive Shearing 1, and Gravity Well 3. Gravity Well 3 is nice to mix with the Subspace Vortex 3. You'll see good numbers out of them. And then as we look at our bridge officers, so we're using a Space Warfare Specialist for Tholians. Obviously the crystal is its own entity, but the other ships that are giving us the damage as we G-weld them onto the crystal are Tholians, so that works nicely. Now here's why we're using Emergency Powered Auxiliary, because we're using 3 Technicians. Chance to increase exotic damage when using Emergency Powered Auxiliary. So using 3 of these, 10% chance to get 25% bonus damage. And then the last 2 we're just using Deflector Officers, chance to reduce the recharge time for Deflector abilities. So that's our basic build. I've seen a lot of different variations, and some of the numbers I've been able to get out of this thing, anywhere from the record run that we're showing you here of 513. If the spawn of the Tholians is not as good, we see anywhere from 300 to 400 in a decent run. So now let's take a look at parse. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump in there at probably the wrong time. Hello, everybody. I'm Shadow Weapon 64, or in the video, you will notice me as Bellatrix flying around there, hitting on the crystal at the same time. I did have a couple of questions for that probably other people might have. One of which is, I know that you stated that you had the omnidirectional as well as the 2, kind of like a 3-piece set in the back. In the front, were any of those weapons related, and they give you a particular set bonus for any of the weapons in front? And what in particular, if any, does that benefit you in that area? Then the other question that I have is, I noticed that you were talking about a specific astrometric trait of some sorts. I'd like to know what that one specifically is, and where do you acquire some of these specific traits. I think that a lot of people coming into the game, maybe for the first time, may want to use the build listed here, and I think it would be good if we can tell them where to find them.
Good questions, gotcha. So on just a basic torp build, usually these torpedoes actually I'm using them with set bonuses, but on the crystal build, since I'm going for exotic, they're actually just there alone. Now the reason I picked them is for their damage. The neutronic torpedo with spread is really nice. The enhanced biomolecular with high yield really is a nice hit with a little AoE after, and with your G-well there, it can do a lot of damage. Now again, I'm not auto firing my torpedoes. If you do, you obviously can control which torp goes out with which torpedo ability, and that does give you a chance to get some better numbers out of it. Also, the gravimetric, another great torpedo with spread. So I just went with 3 torps that I've had good success with that do really well for me. Now, as far as that trait, it is a space rep trait, obviously. Let's see. I'm not actually even sure where it comes from, so we can check that out. I actually believe, yes, it's a Terran. It's from the Terran rep. So yep, there it is. So tier 4 Terran rep would get you that. So you need to have all your reps up.
Guard. A lot of the other things, I've heard some great things about the 31st century ships. I might even try one out myself, and I'm hoping that other people might want to as well. Is there anything specific to this ship that makes this build work better than any other ship that you may want to use?
That's a great question. Actually, there are a few ships that work for CCA. I mean, any kind of science ship will give you a good idea. The reason why I went with this ship is its temporal operative seating. Other ships that I've seen work really well for people are like the E-Dog. Again, you have your temporal operative seating. For me here, recursive shearing 1 didn't do that well. Some people use recursive shearing 3. I like the gravity well 3. It pulls in a lot more ships. It really helps my other abilities. I'm kind of hit or miss with recursive shearing, so it still did pretty decent for me. I've seen really high numbers out of it before. But yeah, pretty much the temporal operative seating is what got me to pick this ship. The E-Dog would work as well. Overall, I'm a big fan of the 31st century ships. I think the Kronos and the Science Vessel are both great ships, and the fact that they're totally cross faction is really nice. So I think it's worth it for anybody looking into them.
That's really awesome. I kind of like a lot of that detail there. And I guess another question that I actually would like to bring up is I know the easiest, probably one of the first few that you can probably slot anywhere, it would probably be, Titan's Rip. Um, so I'm curious as to what in this case makes the subspace vortex particularly special in this build.
Gotcha. Well, the reason I wouldn't use Tychon's Rift here is because it's on a shared cooldown with Gravity Well. Now, usually the run, like you saw there, the combat time I think was 24 seconds, so you might not get a second one. In a good run, you probably wouldn't need one if you're trying to go for the amount of DPS we got out there. But the reason Subspace Vortex, I mean, it's a great ability, and with a lot of EPG, it does some great damage. Now, with our Gravity Well 3 down, with a good amount of control, we really got a lot of ships in there. So that Gravity Well is holding all those ships there on the crystal, and the Subspace Vortex gets dropped. So the Subspace Vortex is affecting all those ships that have gotten pulled in, as well as the crystal. So as we look here at the parse, we'll see that Subspace Vortex 3 did 58.5k. Our Gravity Well did about 35.7. So Subspace Vortex was our second hardest. It was our second hardest hitter. Obviously, you'll see here at the top our pets 130. Now we go to that. That was anti-timeline entanglement, doing almost 100k, and then temporal anomalies came together for about 29 to almost 30k. So we go back to player, and we'll see then next came the isometric charge. Now this is a really cheap ability. This is a console that usually doesn't work so well in other STFs like ISA, things like that, but in Crystal, we found it's really good. We first started using this with our budget build for CCA, and then started throwing it onto our mains. Now you'll see here the third part is isometric charge AoE 53k, but then if you look down again, we have isometric charge again for 17k. So altogether, we're looking at 70k out of isometric charge. Then for our fourth, we have deteriorating secondary deflector. We had three abilities again that proc that off. Next, we have Delphic Tier, another really cheap console that does really well in here, 44k. We went over our Gravity Well, and then we start breaking it down, starts dropping a little. Destabilizing Resonance Beam did 33. Drain Infection, which is obviously out of our skill tree, did 20k. Auxiliary Warp Core Ejection did 17. This console, most of the time, if I'm using it in like an ISA, I'm using it for the bonus exotic damage it gives, and also as a speed boost. You could use it as a little evasive maneuvers. But in here, I'm using it for the EPG and for the actual activatable ability. Does pretty well. Disruption Pulse Emitter, which is another console that we tested here, another console you could buy if you're a Fed, buy cheap on the exchange. Other people who have tested this have gotten better numbers out of it, closer to what the Delphic Tier did. And here I only got 9K. Then here's our recursive shearing at 7, charge particle burst 4, and then now you start to get down to the torpedoes. So you'll see pretty much it all adds up to 513, which for me is my personal best. The records on the leaderboard I think is over 1 million, and there's a few in the 600s, 700s, and whatnot. So really, it's just hit or miss. It's all about getting the right spawn of the Tholian ships, about getting in there, buffing up your abilities, hitting them, and just trying to chase it down. So, but this build has worked out for me. I hope you guys enjoy it, and have a good one.